Well, the president was in front of the crowd and the cameras in Phoenix last night. But behind the scenes in Washington, members of the White House team and top Republicans in Congress are working on the president's top priority to strengthen the economy by cutting taxes. Remarkable.
Well, during Trump's speech in Phoenix, the president also spoke about his campaign promises on issues such as immigration and bringing unity to America. George Thomas has the story.
President Trump opened his campaign-style rally in Phoenix with a call for unity following the deadly protest in Charlottesville, Virginia.
What happened in Charlottesville strikes at the core of America. And tonight, this entire arena stands united in forceful condemnation of the thugs who perpetrate hatred and violence.
He faulted the media for misrepresenting his response to the protests.
They don't report the facts, just like they don't want to report that I spoke out forcefully against hatred, bigotry, and violence, and strongly condemned the neo-Nazis, the white supremacists, and the KKK.
The president also touched on a few of his most popular campaign promises, among them some that are very important to people in this part of the country: the promise to build a wall and enforce stricter immigration laws.
Now, the obstructionist Democrats would like us not to do it, but believe me, if we have to close down our government, we're building that wall.
Back in Washington, as Congress prepares to resume work in less than 2 weeks, the president is hoping his party can come together and deliver on his key priority, a tax reform bill. According to Politico, some of the president's top aides and Republican leaders have apparently found consensus on the basic outline of a tax plan. It will be up to Congress to flesh out the details of any such plan and turn it into a bill, but the White House is reportedly focused on getting a tax measure passed this year, especially after the Senate failed to repeal and replace Obamacare. Meanwhile, some potentially good news on the economic front. The Atlanta Federal Reserve is currently estimating the economy will grow at 3.8% in the third quarter, well ahead of the 1.9% in the first half of the year, and far better than President Obama's final year in office, just 1.6%. Still, the pressure is on for this White House and Republican lawmakers to deliver a big win before next year's elections. And they're hoping a tax bill will be that big legislative victory. George Thomas, CBN News.
Well, thanks, George. You know, despite what you read in the New York Times, the Washington Post, or listen to CNN, the people are getting together in Washington to get this tax cut through. It is so important for our economy. It's so important for America. Well, with us right now from Washington is Stephen Moore. He's an economist with FreedomWorks, and he's an advisor to the Trump campaign. Stephen, welcome back. Hey, it's good news, I think, that those folks are working together. They've actually got a framework of a plan right now.
You got it, Pat. And by the way, let me step back a minute, and because that report we just heard was so important. 3.8% growth, Pat, in the third quarter. Now we're about 7 weeks. We're a little over halfway through the third quarter, so this is a preliminary estimate. But 3.8%. I mean, my goodness, if Barack Obama ever had 3.8% growth, he would have done cartwheels down Pennsylvania Avenue. I mean, this is an incredible number, especially given that the economy was only growing at about 1.5% in Barack Obama's last year in office. What I'm saying, Pat, is the economy has ramped up big time. It has shifted into a faster gear because of Donald Trump's policies. He's always talked, and when I talked to him, we always talked about two things to really improve the economy. And it's very Reagan-esque. Get tax rates down and get regulations off of the back of business. The second half of that, he is doing big time right now, Pat. There was a new study that came out by my friends at the Competitive Enterprise Institute that finds that the number of new regulations has come to a screeching halt. And those regulations impede business, they impede higher wages for workers, and they impede hiring more workers. So this is a big deal. Did you know, Pat, for every new regulation under Donald Trump, 16 regulations have been repealed. So this is a pro-growth president, but you asked the right question. How are the Republicans going to get this tax cut done? Because I think that's the missing piece of the equation right now.
Well, Steve, let's look at some of the elements of that. As I understand, they're really going to stick it to these high tax states. If they take away the deduction for state taxes, that's going to be a body blow to California, New York, and these high tax states. I mean, the Democrats' strongholds, they're going to scream like wounded eagles on that one. How the Republicans will get through that?
Yeah, well, Chuck Schumer is not a happy camper right now from New York, that's for sure. But this is the most unfair tax deduction in the tax code because, you know, there are 9 states right now, Pat, that have no income tax at all. States like Tennessee and Texas and Florida and New Hampshire and Nevada, and I could name all of them. Those states, you know, they don't get the write-off for their taxes, but those high tax states that you mentioned, like New York and California, my home state of Illinois, Connecticut, New Jersey, they get these big write-offs. And by the way, I just got back, you know, from vacation. I was in California. You know, one of the most beautiful places on this planet is California, and it's amazing how liberals have destroyed that state because it is such an amazing place. But California, do you know what their highest income tax rate is today in California today? Just take a wild guess, Pat.
I don't know, 15%?
13.5%.
13.5%.
Yeah. So you can live in California and pay 13.5%, or you can move to Nashville, Tennessee, and pay 0. So we're seeing people. If you want to see the effect of lower taxes, look at the migration that is happening in this country out of those high tax states like Illinois and Connecticut and New Jersey and New York to the states like Texas and Florida. I was in Florida also a couple of weeks ago, and all I saw was people with California license plates. He said, "I'm out of here. I can't afford to live in California anymore." So I do think we ought to get rid of that deductibility of the state and local taxes.
There's another one they're putting on the table, which is a sort of a darling of the housing lobby, that they take away the deduction for mortgage interest. How's that going to work?
Well, let me explain that, because the way that we devised this plan, and I think what they will come up with will be very similar to what we came up with during the campaign, is that if you have less than, say, $1 million of income, you'll still get your housing deduction. But you know, why should you be able to deduct the value of your home if you buy an $8 million castle or something like that? I mean, the idea is to encourage home ownership. We shouldn't be subsidizing these massive, houses for very wealthy people. And so get rid of that. So the idea here, just so your viewers understand, Pat, is a very simple concept that Reagan did very effectively in the 80s. Get rid of all these loopholes. Get rid of as many of the write-offs as you possibly can, but then cut the tax rates for everybody. So everybody is paying less. By the way, by getting rid of those loopholes, you make the tax system much fairer, because everybody's going to pay their fair share if they don't have these special interest carve-outs and deductions and loopholes. I mean, you can get in the tax code right now, you would be so surprised at the absurdity of some of these deductions. You know, it's an 80,000-page tax code. Can you believe that, Pat? 80,000 pages of regulations and loopholes. You can get write-offs for, windmills, bull sperm, all of the racetracks, all of these things. Just get rid of it. Make it simple. I love the idea, Pat, of the postcard tax return, where you can literally fill out your taxes in 10 minutes.
All right, it's got to go through Congress. So what's the deal? I mean, I've had on this program the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee. He's a brilliant guy, terrific guy, and his plan is so simple. Will the Republicans in the Senate go along with this, do you think?
They better. You know, we saw what happened. I've kind of hesitated to make any more predictions, Pat, because I think on this show a few months ago, I almost guaranteed you the Republicans were going to get Obamacare repealed, and they didn't get that done. So I'm almost embarrassed by that prediction. Look, Republicans, if they get through this year with a Republican House, a Republican Senate, a Republican president, I heard you last night talking about 2/3 of the governors are now Republicans, 2/3 of the state legislatures. You know, if the Republicans can't get this done, shame on them, right? Shame on them. So but you run into the same problem we ran into on health care, Pat. There's only 52 Republicans in the Senate, only 52, and the Democrats are in a resistance mode. They are against anything that Trump is for. I've never seen anything quite like it. The fierce partisanship of Democrats, even things that are good for the country, Pat, Democrats will not vote for if Trump is for it. So that means, you know, you got to get 50 out of 52, and that's a heavy lift, I've got to say. And Donald Trump called out, John McCain campaign and in his speech last night in Arizona and said, get your Arizona senator to vote for this program so we can get it through.
What's the effect this going to do? Let's assume we lower the rate for everybody.
Yep.
If the GDP is already 3.8%,
yeah.
I mean, what's the number can this go to? Are we talking about 6 or 7% growth?
Well, you know, it's funny you should ask that. I was looking back at some of the growth rates we had under Ronald Reagan when he did his famous tax cut. And by the way, I just got to tell your viewers, I had such a thrill last week. I spoke at the Reagan Ranch out in Santa Barbara last week. I don't know if you've been out there, Pat, but it's an amazing place to be. And that's where Ronald Reagan signed his historic 1981 tax cut in August of 1981. Well, in any case, what we saw in the aftermath of that tax cut, we actually had quarters of growth. You can look it up, folks, if you don't believe me, of 7 and 8%. Now, could we do it again today? That might be a little shooting from the moon, but I do think we can get 3 to 4 to 5% growth, and that's going to feel a lot better for Americans, compared to the 1.5 to 2% growth we had under Barack Obama. So you do the regulatory relief, you do the tax cut, and you do the pro-America energy policies that we've talked a lot about on this show. Yeah, I do think I'm one of those people who think we can get 3 to 4% growth for a sustained period of time. And if you do that, the debt is going to come down, the deficit is going to come down, we're going to have more jobs, higher wages. It's better for everyone. And I am so disgusted. I have to say, Pat, I'm truly disgusted with the national media today that isn't covering this story about the potential, number one, what's happening with the economy and how it's gotten better. And second of all, you know, how this tax cut could really improve the lives of Americans. We have an incredibly uncompetitive tax system right now. We have the highest tax rates in the world on our businesses. We see, week after week, American businesses moving to Ireland or Canada or China or Mexico. Let's bring them back, Pat. Let's bring those companies back to America so they're creating jobs in Michigan, and Ohio, and Pennsylvania, not in Beijing and Mexico City.
The Democrats are going to demagogue this. It's unbelievable how they're doing it, but they'll say, these are, quote, tax cuts for the rich.
That's for the rich.
Absolute lie. It's no such thing. It's the tax cut for everybody, and everybody's going to benefit. The whole economy is going to benefit. Do you think that, I mean, it's a question of intestinal fortitude. Do the Republicans have it? I mean, what is it? I mean, Mitch McConnell is a pretty sharp guy. Can't he drive that thing through?
He's got to. I mean, really, there's no room for failure here. I would just urge everyone watching this show, put some pressure on your United States Senator and your congressman. Get this thing done. It's going to be good for America. It worked for Reagan. By the way, it didn't just work for Reagan. It worked for a Democrat, John F. Kennedy, who also promoted a tax cut and created a great prosperity in this country. This is for the people who are hurting the most in this country today, people at the bottom of the ladder who don't have the economic opportunities, don't have the availability of the good paying jobs. We will get those jobs back in America. I was on the campaign trail, this last year, and I went to areas in the Midwest, the kind of Rust Belt states, and in places like West Virginia, and I saw places that just have had no recovery. Pat, it was really a depressing thing to say. The liberals act as if everything was so wonderful under Obama. No, there were whole areas of the country that did not feel any kind of recovery.
That's right.
Trump is so dedicated to bringing jobs back to those areas, to those kind of middle class, blue-collar workers where factories were lost, where steel plants were closed, where coal mines were closed. We've got to get those people back in the jobs where they belong. The best way to increase the revenues, Pat, is get people a job so they're actually paying taxes.
If he gets this tax cut through and the economy goes, he's got a lock on a second term, and when he does
I agree with that.
He's got a lock on about 5 new Supreme Court appointees. He will change the court. He will change the direction of this country. And that's why the liberals hate what's being done. They see down the road that if they let him have any success here, that he will come back and the Republicans will have a lock on it. But the Republicans should have sense enough to realize that they can win this thing big time if they just go for it. Steve, I'm with you. Thank you, buddy, for being here. God bless you.
Thanks, Pat. Have a great week.
All right.
Fascinating. Did it really happen under John F. Kennedy?
Yeah.
He did the same thing.
He put through a big tax cut, absolutely. I mean, you've got to do it. You've got to do it. All right, what's happening next?